Meanwhile, I was trying to shop something over the weekend, went to check out on my phone, and they didn't have shop pay, so you had to put in your credit card details.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, I can't be bothered with that. My card's over the other side of the couch.
This week in e-commerce, episode 142. I am Mal here, back with you for another week, along with Alex, who is back from the dead.
Hello, I am back.
Sorry, Riverside just introduced some new features.
Mal thinks he's a real podcaster now with sound effects.
Well, this is back in my radio days. We used to have that. That was on the board, so we could just like press a button and like trigger different effects. So that takes me back about, gosh, over 20 years now since I started being on air. Over 20 years. I started when I was like 18 years old on air.
We need to get some trademark sounds into our show, Mal.
Yeah, I might have to go onto Fiverr or something and just get someone to whip up some custom sounds. But how's your week been, Alex?
Yeah, good. Busy. It's only Tuesday afternoon. We normally record in the morning, so I feel like I've already lived a life.
Yeah,
it's only 3 p.m. What about you?
Are you watching a lot of World Cup?
No, I'm not. I'm sorry. But I am watching a lot of Bravo Summer House reunion. Big drama over in the Bravoverse. You know, you've got your entertainment, I've got mine.
Excellent. I'm actually surprised by how few people I know are watching the World Cup. Like, I'm obsessed right now. I'm waking up every single morning, watching games, before I go to bed, watching the highlights of the games which I missed. It's almost consumed my life. And this Friday, I'm taking a couple of hours off to go see Australia play Paraguay.
How cool. No, it's everywhere. I love it. I love seeing everyone get into it. So you're getting up early for all the games and everything?
Not too early. I'm still waking up normal time and then going to the gym, watching some games there. Maybe when I get home, if there's one on, I'll put it on. But my kids and my whole family are right into it. You know, so we've got our family World Cup draw. We've all got our teams. I don't know what happened. I ended up with the strongest draw. I am not the most popular person in the house. Every time one of their teams loses, it's always like, you got Germany and Spain and England. I'm just like, yeah, sorry. It's a random generator. And besides, I didn't do the draw. So you cannot blame me.
I've been a big fan of seeing, and we see this all the time with these types of events, right? But the collaborations. There's been a lot of really cool collabs or brands using the World Cup to drive some more revenue, which we love.
Absolutely. And actually surprised by how I expected to see a lot more brands kind of jump into it, like either with color or with their own marketing, just kind of doing their own in-house kind of like quote unquote World Cup tournament. But I've seen less of it than what I would have thought, which is surprising. But the World Cup ads themselves have been pretty good, I think. Yeah, I'm getting flogged with the McDonald's ad. I think Apple have a really good one.
I was about to say McDonald's. Yeah, McDonald's always kill these, right?
Yeah. As a result, I now have 6 of those collector cups at home. I've got every single one now, I believe, except for the New Zealand player who they created one for. Okay, Tim Payne, that was his name, who was meant to be, I'm not sure if you know the story. On social media, someone came out and said, this is like the world's least popular football player. Yes. He only had like about 4,000 followers or something. Yep. And overnight, he got up to like 1 million, 2 million. He's at 4 million now. And McDonald's are making a Tim Payne commemorative World Cup Collector's Cup.
I did hear about this. It's awesome. He was getting 1 million followers a day or something nuts.
Something like that. And New Zealand, did they? No, they lost yesterday, unfortunately, to Egypt. So I don't think they're going to be making it through to the next round. But that's not what we're here for. We're here to discuss retail and e-commerce, and got a full episode today. And the first one is last week, Google have officially launched Agentic commerce in Australia. We are the first country in the region. They're going to be launching it directly inside Google Search, AI Mode, and the Gemini app, launching with Kogan, Bunnings, Adore Beauty, Petbarn, and The Iconic. This is really significant that it's happened so bloody fast.
It's happened fast. It's happened with some big players. A few of those are clients as well. So I know the team's really excited to kind of be a little bit behind the scenes on these ones. So yeah, I think we're all kind of really geared up to see what's actually going to happen once they go live.
Yeah, and they've made it completely frictionless as well. And the fact that you can actually transact directly from the AI output. So whatever that says, you're going to have like Bunnings, let's say, in there, and you'll be able to click on a link, add the product directly to your cart without actually ever having to visit the store. And it will then monitor it as well for things like price drops, so that when you're ready, you can buy whatever you want without actually having to go to the store, which is Great.
over the weekend, went to check out on my phone and they didn't have shop pay, so you had to put in your credit card details, and I was like, "Oh, I can't be bothered with that. My card's over the other side of the couch." So I think it's interesting. We're probably going to see this more and more, where that there is such adopters and laggards, and we're going to see this kind of tech, I don't know, space widen. If that
That
makes
divide, yeah. Grow
yeah,
between that. Look, and we've talked about this before, where there are some products which are naturally suited towards the, hey, do you know what? I need a new pack of screws or I need new magnets from Bunnings. Great, I'll just press a button,
yeah,
versus a more high involvement purchase. But it does mean, though, that when this gets rolled out to everyone, and it will get rolled out to everyone soon, you got to make sure that your product data is correct. Your product feed, your structured data has to be in a good state so that the AI can actually query it properly, understand which products it should be servicing.
yeah. We've been working with some of those players, big ones with massive SKU counts as well, right? To get their feed into a good place for a really long time. So, yeah, it's kind of an exciting time for them as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, our second quickie is a bit of a hybrid in that New York has launched the world first synthetic performer law, which means that for any brand which is advertising in the state of New York, if you use a synthetic performer, so essentially an AI performer, an AI actor, you will now be fined if you don't have conspicuous disclosure. So in other words, you need to be very clear upfront that it is an AI actor, for instance, and there is a $1,000 penalty for the first violation and $5,000 penalty for every subsequent violation. So relatively small numbers, but at the same time, this could grow very, very quickly if you're continuing to use a lot of AI actors in there.
100%. If you think about all of the different channels and all of that, those penalties can rack up. I think I saw this first on the Daily Oz, and they had some images of brands that are advertising in AI in New York using AI, and they've got that, this is an AI model or that text somewhere, so they're kind of compliant here, right? But I don't know how much of the impact is then lost. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I agree. I think that if you disclose it instantly, you put up red flags on it. It's like, when you see the ads with like warning labels all over them, it's like, okay, well, I kind of need to, be wary of this. It's going to be the same effect, I believe. So I think you should be disclosing that, but it also means that it's more of a flex when you're not disclosing that. Well, sorry, when you're not using AI as well.
Because
And
you
there
know
are
it's
brands,
there.
who
Yeah.
said, you know what, we 100% will not use AI. You remember Peter Alexander a few months ago using that AI generated dog campaign, which they got into all sorts of hot water for. And the community did not like it at all. But what makes this one even more interesting is that it's not just New York brands, it's any brand who's advertising in the state of New
Correct.
York.
Yeah.
So if you have any ads going into New York, and chances are, if you're selling to the US, you'd be stupid not to, and you're using AI, you need to be disclosing that right now.
Yeah, it's a really, really, really good call out. And very nuanced as well. I mean, we don't want people to be taking, or different states to be taking different approaches. Otherwise, can get messy logistically, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And the other one as well, which off like in parallel to this, is what recently happened to HighSmile. And this is one which you shared recently, where the ACCC has fined HighSmile about $140,000 for using review videos which weren't posted by influencers or third parties, but by their staff.
Yes. Yeah. This one I found interesting because they talked about it on their own Instagram social stories. I don't know, Mal, if I've completely misread this, but my thought went to they've agreed to do an apology for a lesser fine, or maybe part of the fine is a public acknowledgement. What did you think?
Yeah, I haven't seen the public acknowledgement. I look, I dare say that might be the case for that, because this fine does seem relatively small, but it depends on how much margin you have, right? Whether you can absorb $138,000. I know I can't. But yeah, I think it's something where it just shows that we need to be much more transparent with who we're using. So even using staff to do, reviews on social, it's almost like you get to a point where you need to start disclosing that now. And we've talked about that previously in the past in social media, of that's where hashtags come into it, putting in hashtag ad, hashtag
Yeah.
staff,
Yeah.
something like that. I think it doesn't need to be, all over the ad, like a conspicuous, conspicuously displayed like what New York wants. But I think we just need to be more transparent with this sort of thing as well, if you are going to be using your staff.
Yeah, no, 100%. And trust is everything. We always say
Mm.
that. So the cost of this will be more than that fine.
Yeah, 100%. Now, our last quickie, and although not really quickies, we're going quite long on each one of these, is about activewear and showing that in the US, there's a small set of activewear brands, Set Active, 437 Form, and Splits 59, who are slowly starting to take more and more share off the incumbents like Lululemon and Viore, who we talked about before, but by focusing on more TikTok native marketing rather than those elaborate brand moments. And this is one which I thought was really interesting because obviously in Australia, we have so many activewear brands here that the challenges are, out the wazoo between like Muscle Republic, Muscle Nation, Stacks, PE Nation, Nimble. There's so many brands here, that there's probably a lesson to be learned here in terms of like how these brands will continue to grow.
Yeah, it is interesting when you frame it like that because I do think our market is completely different in the activewear space. COVID really shaped that and brought a lot of these emerging players, kind of gave them more market share, right? So interesting take. I think we've obviously spoken about Lululemon a lot, whether these brands are also going through aloe, or there's multiple fights going on at the moment in the activewear world. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think with these ones in particular, what was interesting about this Business of Fashion article was that these brands were able to be a lot more nimble in terms of being able to put out a lot more creative, engage more with their community. Whereas if you look at that on the scale of like a Lulu, they do massive events. They do these really elaborate things which take a lot of money. Yes, very impressive, but are also slow to execute as well. But in this case, the speed actually becomes an advantage because they can out content the incumbents essentially.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah.
I've seen a lot of P Nations TikTok content. It's really cool. It's really great stuff.
Yeah, so I think if you are one of these challenger brands, don't try to follow the big brands out there. Try to carve your own niche and look at what actually you can compete on. And I think in a lot of cases, it is speed, because having worked at some big companies before, the bigger you get, the slower things become as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, our first deep dive. And before I do that, where is it? Our first deep dive for today is ads are coming to ChatGPT. Matter of fact, they're already here. And there's a lot of brands who are advertising on ChatGPT already. Now, the interesting one with this, though, is that OpenAI's finances were leaked last week, and it is eye-opening. They lost $39 billion last year against $8 billion of booked revenue. So their losses were $39 billion. So spending way more, $47 billion in expenses, which have massively seen how that discrepancy is, and also just how that overall AI, AI business is run. Sorry, that didn't make a whole lot of sense. But the interesting thing is that now they're really pushing ads, obviously because they need to increase the revenue since they're losing a lot of subscribers to them. And now you have AI, ChatGPT ads, which have started launching. And I'm seeing a lot of brands, including Adore, who we spoke about before, and some other brands now advertising quite a lot in ChatGPT as well. So, Alex, how do you think this is going to move the needle?
I think that it's that similar approach, right, to traditional search Google shopping ads, right? Where it's that intent based. This is going to work really, really well for brands like Adore that have a large catalog, that they have that specific need. And to our point, which we're probably never going to stop banging on about, having high quality data, right?
Mm.
But it's also an unknown, and these players are the most untrustworthy. I don't think anybody can say that around Google, Meta, OpenAI, right? Like we're always not 100% sure what's going on there. So when it comes to advertising and having that skepticism around the content, regardless of whether it's advertising content or not, I don't see them being able to uncouple that as well.
Yeah, look, I think there's the incentives are always there for them to kind of be using the data in ways, even though they say that it doesn't actually. I think when I read it on the OpenAI ads platform, it was saying that the ads will appear contextually, which is very, very vague, right?
Yeah, you just, I'll speak for just myself. I just can't ever believe any of that.
Mm.
And with Google, they try to serve you the best out at the best moment. So with ChatGPT, Why wouldn't they try and serve you that in that moment? They should try. That's how they're going to make both the brand money and them money. So there's a lot of conflict going on in how that comes together.
Yeah, I definitely think it's worthwhile for a lot of brands to start experimenting in this space, given that it is brand new. And with anyone jumping into Meta early or Google Ads early, you always saw the best results, the best CPCs, the best CAC when you were new to the platform, when you were one of the early adopters to that before it gets really noisy. So I think this is something this year every brand should be looking at carving out some budget and doing a proper rigorous experiment, around that to actually look at what the incremental uplift is. So depending on what the targeting is, this is a really good opportunity if you keep all things the same. Focus on maybe we just target New South Wales, with ChatGPT ads for the next quarter and just see what the impact is, whether we see a meaningful uplift in sales relative to other states as well. So I think it's a really good opportunity to start testing that, given that it's only increasing the volume of AI searches coming in, where even in Google's default channel groupings, they now have AI in there as well. So it's not something which you had to you manually need to enter now and then actively surfacing all the traffic coming to your website from AIs.
Exactly. And look, Mel, I do want to call out there, whilst I 100% agree, everybody should be jumping on thinking about what test kind of market they can run. There are a lot of brands that aren't even doing the most basic steps at the moment. So still talking brands that don't have a Bing feed. Bing is pushing into Microsoft, being able to power all those LLMs, making sure that you've got a Google Shopping free listing feed that powers Gemini. So making sure that you've got that data piece, that first layer, we all should definitely have that. And then it's that encouragement of the ads piece next.
Yeah, I think data, like you said, is so important to that. You can't play in the organic space unless you have the data right. And for a time, you might be able to buy some of that attention if you have your ad set up correctly. But from what I can see from the platform, it very much is a bit of a black box where you're entering your brand, you're entering your objectives, and then you just let it figure out who it's going to target. There's not too many guardrails around that. But like I said, definitely something worth looking at now if you are at that point. And again, this is all budget dependent as well. You're probably going to have much lower, if you are just starting, you're probably going to still have better return on your investment investing into some of the more established channels rather than going into a net new channel like ChatGPT ads. Having said that, I don't know nothing about it yet. So I'm just speculating right now in terms of who I'd be recommending using it and how much they invest in it as well.
Yeah, and Mel, I think that's important though, because we're all learning, this is all unraveling in real time. Luckily though, we work with amazing brands and we've got our fingertips on a lot of these programs early. So, heard it here first type stuff.
Okay, our second deep dive is an article again from Business of Fashion, which highlighted 3 brands, Doen, La Linea, and Sick Asset, which we had previously talked about. La Linea we've talked about previously in the past, about how they were D2C brands which started around the same time as the likes of Everlane, Allbirds, Glossier. But whereas the latter 3 are now going through their fair share of troubles, and all 3 of them have recently sold for much lower multiples than what they were previously valued at, these 3 brands have continued to grow. And from reading the detail of the article, a lot of it is because they've essentially eschewed the traditional D2C growth at all costs model of just pumping every single dollar into ads and trying to grow, but have done it in a much more deliberate way and are all doing 9 figures plus revenue and highly, highly profitable, which is probably the biggest difference between them and Glossier, Allbirds, and Everlane.
Yeah, because that's what I was trying to figure out is out of all of the businesses there, Everlane, we've spoken about it before, such a solid business before. So to see these 2 businesses split off in another way and continue to see that growth, pure D2C, I think it's an interesting one for Australian brands to watch, because we've spoken a lot about our D2C brands moving to physical retail as well, and whether or not that's right for every brand.
Yeah, look, and I think a lot of it is that it may not be right for every brand, but part of it is also that deliberate growth around really thinking about what your margins are. Looking at how far to extend your product mix. I think Doen was one of the brands. Actually, no, it was another brand. I can't remember which one now. Which was saying that they essentially built their entire business off one product, but rather than expanding very, very quickly into lots of other categories, they were very deliberate. They started off first with this frocked type dress, and then very deliberately added on complementary products products to this whole flocked range. And now, while that flocked range is maybe about 13, 17% of their overall revenue, they're less dependent on it now. It's taking them about 10 years to get to this point of gradually expanding it out in a very deliberate way, which always kept the customer at the center of it.
Yeah, that's slow, steady, scalable. It's really impressive.
Yeah, so I think that's something which, a lot of brands should be looking at, particularly if you're starting out now, thinking about where are you actually investing in? Are you investing in growth at all costs and trying to be that 8-figure, 9-figure brand as quickly as possible? Or do you have a much more deliberate strategy? Because we've seen it a lot. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago with Trapstar and G'd Up, these brands which, almost fly too close to the sun too quickly. The wax melts, and next thing you know, you don't have a business anymore. Although, as an example, I don't want to get myself in any hot water over what's happening with those two brands, but definitely one to watch out for. Okay, and our final deep dive for the day is recently I was sent a deck from Paramount, of all brands. So Paramount, who do their streaming, sent their 2026 CTV guide. And while it's US only, it is really interesting in the fact that how hard they're going and how they're essentially creating this guide for brands to start looking at other channels. And effectively, this is what I got from this deck, is that it's a whole pitch deck which explains why you need to diversify, essentially, and why you can't just rely on Meta and Google for everything. And I think my view is that it's super important right now. As we see more and more media consolidation, it's harder and harder to stand out. But there's still so many surfaces out there which we're barely even touching.
That channel mix piece is always super interesting. I really think about that getting off the screen, or at least getting off the little screen. Maybe that means going to the big screen. But really, those real life, physical ads that really take you out of just scrolling on TikTok or whatever, super impactful as a complement to that overall mix.
Yeah, and we talked about with the World Cup ads before, where you are there, you are watching the World Cup on a big screen, most likely either by yourself, with your family, or with friends, or at a bar somewhere. And it's big real estate. And if you have the right creative, it can make a hell of a lot of impact on there. And yes, the World Cup is super expensive, but you can imagine how many people and how many hours are being spent on Amazon Prime, Netflix, Disney Plus. These are all great services. There was actually an ad which I hadn't seen before from Diddy. Not sure if you've seen this one from last year, which has like a leprechaun dressed in orange playing a flute to like lure these three friends out for like a crazy night out. I had never seen this before, but during the Disney Plus streaming of the NBA Finals, they smashed it hard, and now I'm obsessed with that ad. But you couldn't get that in social media because of how infrequently you see things. But having the right creative on the right medium means that it can actually stick. It actually has time to actually grow in your memory and actually hold some sort of position there.
100%. I don't know, like I've always been drawn to ads. I know that sounds crazy, but there were these iconic ads growing up. It was a lot more nostalgic, right? So to be able to nail an awesome TV ad, have that memory recall is really impressive. I'm hearing a lot of brands advertising on podcasts at the moment as well. And listening to, like, let's say, Call Her Daddy US. I hope you know Alex Cooper. Good, awesome, pass the test. And you get served the ads, and they're local Adelaide ads. That's really cool to me. So I think there's a lot more to investigate beyond, I know we talk about Meta, Google, OpenAI all the time, but there's a lot more.
Yeah, 100%. I think so much. One of the most important things with all of that is to make sure that your creative is generally differentiated as well. And that's all thinking about what are the things which customers remember. They remember jingles, they remember characters, they remember, things like that, rather than just something generic. And that's why one of my big problems with a lot of the social media advertising, where it just copies each other rather than being something which is unique and actually has cut through. Because like you, I grew up a massive ad junkie. That's why I'm in this business now, because I loved marketing, I loved advertising. But at some point, we thought it was more expensive. The platform was more expensive, was more important than the creative. Where the creative, I think, is equally as important, if not more important, because the right creative, shown a less frequent number of times, can probably have a higher impact than average creative shown tons of times.
That speaks to we're kind of talking about channel mix here. We're also talking about the funnel or the funnel instead, or however you want to talk about it that right way. But there's something so instantly gratifying about seeing Google shopping ads and seeing the revenue and the sales and the orders, right? So that in itself is a massive discussion that I know you probably argue with many founders pretty frequently on.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think a lot of people become addicted to the fact that, oh, if I put $1 here, I can get $5 there. But I think Rory Sutherland, who's the chair of Ogilvy in the UK, very famously has said that marketing is a fat tail, not a fat head. So you can capture that immediate demand there by putting an ad in front of them which says, buy my product now. But the reality is that's probably only about 5% of your total audience. So when you exhaust yourself of that audience, who are they going to buy?
Yeah.
And they're going to buy the brands who are targeting that 95% who you're not taking to because you're so focused on a ROAS. Now, I'm not saying that you can't measure anything from marketing, but the sale is probably the wrong thing to measure. And when I still hear performance marketers talk about the fact that only run conversion ads or purchase ads because if you target people who watch videos or click or click on links, that's all they do. You're targeting clickers or video viewers. It's like, hang on, but they're not mutually exclusive. You can be all three things at once. I watch videos, I click links, and I buy.
Yeah, exactly.
But just not always in that order.
Yeah. Well, and every time they're in a different order, most likely.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it can take you months as well before you decide to purchase it. Right now, I'm looking for another guitar. I've been thinking about this guitar for about 3 months. I'll probably be ready to pull the trigger in a couple of months. That doesn't mean don't speak to me, just that don't necessarily speak to me to try to convert me right now because I'm not ready right now, but I am browsing. So speak to me as someone who is browsing.
Yeah, 100%.
Anyway, that is a topic for another discussion. Alex, what do you have coming up this week?
Gosh, I should be prepared for this question you ask me every week. It is end of financial year. So to be honest, I'm just laser focused on kind of rounding that out, having more and more conversations every single day about peak retail, testing, optimizing for that. So that will take me to Friday before I blink. What about you, Mel?
About the same. It is a crazy town right now between the traveling, the speaking, all the client work. It's really exciting. A lot of good stuff happening. It feels like post-July, it may be settling down a little bit, which is nice. So that'll be something to look forward to. But really, right now, it's all about Friday, Australia versus Paraguay. I hope everyone listening to the podcast is going to be cheering on the green and gold. In the meantime, though, Online Retailer is coming up in July. Our all access passes are nearly all gone. So if they are all gone, we do have another link which I cannot remember what it is anymore, which will give you a pass for the general expo floor. It won't get you into the some of the events, but it will get you into all the free, all the everything on the expo floor except for the ticketed spaces. So definitely look out for that. If you can't make it, tickets for that I believe are about $100 or maybe $150 for the general floor tickets, but if you use our code, you'll be able to get in for free. So definitely look out for that if all the VIP codes are taken already.
100%. Make sure you get in quick.
All right. Keep innovating, keep growing, and keep selling. And we'll see you back next week.
We'll see you soon.